This is Gene Krebs.
Hi there. Oh. Whoop. Whoosh.
And we're high on Ohio.
We're going around this great state. We're talking to people who know how things work. And it's my great pleasure today to be sitting here with Jenny Barney. Jenny has a long, illustrious career in public policy development. You were mayor of Upper Arlington. You were the city manager for Upper Arlington. You've been
Franklin County Clerk of Courts.
Clerk of Courts, and so you were with the Mid Ohio Regional Planning Commission. But you know how things work from a variety of levels of local government here in Ohio. And there's very, very few people in that group. So first of all, tell us a little bit, how did you fetch up to Central Ohio? Because you're not from here.
No, I'm not. I grew up in Cincinnati.
Okay.
So not too far away.
Okay.
But got here by way of Chicago, Los Angeles, outside New York City, and then finally here. All with a husband and a new career. So we followed the jobs.
Okay. And you finally fetched up back here in Ohio then?
35 years ago. So now it's home.
Okay. All right. And so how did you get so much involved in a local government and everything then?
By accident. Literally by accident.
Okay.
At the time, I had a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Okay.
My 2-year-old started a house fire.
What?
And
excuse me,
yes.
I never knew this.
Yes, he started a house fire by plugging something into a socket. He was in Children's Hospital. I started volunteering at Children's Hospital. We'd just moved here. We'd only been here about a year. And I started volunteering at Children's Hospital for the burn unit.
Okay.
Doing fundraisers. And at that time, the fire departments of various cities were collecting money, fill a boot, give a hoot, fill a boot campaign. And I asked my city, the city of Upper Arlington, if they would participate. The fire chief at that point said, yes, if you will volunteer to start a fire safety education program. So this was 1980.
Okay.
And there were no fire safety education programs. There was no 911. Kids didn't know about stop, drop, and roll. They didn't know to get down and go under smoke. And so I gathered a couple folks and researched across the country and started a fire safety program for kids preschool through grade 8 with a unique program for each grade, and did that as a volunteer.
Okay.
So, and it was the first one in Ohio.
Okay.
I mean, it's hard to imagine that we don't teach our kids.
You know, there's one of the consistent themes we find in doing these shows is that when you talk to leaders, so often they began by just volunteering or interning in something, and it just kind of grew like that.
And I think that is how I have felt about all my public service. That I am a volunteer. It is a great privilege to give back to your community. And so from there, I was appointed to city council, and then somebody asked me to run, and it just went on. I became a county.
And on and on and on and on.
And I always felt like it was the greatest gift to me that I could have to make a difference.
Okay. And you were asked to be Franklin County Clerk of Courts, and I think that was in a less than desirable time for the office.
Absolutely. I think they probably asked a million other people before, and they ran screaming from the room. But it was while the current Clerk of Courts had been indicted and was on his way to federal prison, had been found guilty of embezzlement. And so, again...
The Iron Bar Motel.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so I was appointed and then was elected to that office to clean up the office, which was a great privilege and brought in a lot of volunteers from the business community to help me.
Okay, all right. And so what are you up to now then? So but I don't want to forget though, you went over to Morpsey, and I think you were chair. What is Morpsey again, for those people who may not be familiar?
Morpsey is MORPC, Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, which is a coalition of local governments in, I think it's an 11-county area in central Ohio. that come together both for the distribution of federal dollars, but also in
For
local
transportation?
for transportation. Sorry,
Yeah.
but also networking and problem solving and cooperation among governments. So it was
Okay.
an interesting and an important place to be involved in.
Oh, yeah. And so what are you up to now?
So now I retired from city management
Okay.
after 11 years, a job I loved. But the hours are 24/7 with calls in the middle of the night from police and fire.
Let me guess. When you would go to the Giant Eagle there in Upper Arlington, and you'd run in just for a jug of milk and a loaf of bread, it'd take you an hour and a half.
That's exactly right. My family no longer would shop with me.
Because everybody's reach out and go, Jenny, I just want to tell you, we're having trouble with the garbage pickup. There's a barking
Yes.
dog. I have potholes. Da 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 da.
Or church services, or
Yeah.
anywhere you go.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful that people feel comfortable coming up to you, but it is also difficult to have a personal
Right.
family time
Yeah.
together or with friends. So
Yeah.
frequently you'd leave the city to go have dinner with friends.
Yeah, I can see that. Yes, yeah. And in fact, I was just talking this morning to a nice young man who another friend of his was thinking about running for state rep, and I was just looking at him going, you lose all privacy, and it's getting much worse now with social media. So you got to be prepared for that.
And sometimes it's wonderful.
Yeah, you get to help people. You get to make a difference in their lives in a positive manner.
And it's great to meet people that are excited about government.
Yeah.
And, but sometimes it does get a little much.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about government. There's been a lot of changes, proposed changes going on, and local government's under a lot of stresses that I don't think they were ready for a few years ago. How do you see the local government's role, governance reform, all of that coming forward here in Ohio in the future? And where is it right now, and how do you see it progressing?
Well, let me back up from where it is right now to where it used to be.
Okay.
Because I was involved with local government from the 80s and then through 2012.
Okay.
So up until the late 90s, local governments were really left on their own. I mean, there really was, you worked within your community, you solved things within your community. You really didn't need a whole lot of, you didn't pay any attention to what was happening at the State House. Then all of a sudden, now local government, one of their most important jobs is to see what's going on at the State House. Because no longer is the state government, or can they afford to not look at what local government is doing.
Okay.
And so now you're really involved in the State House.
Okay. I also get the sense that it used to be that we could always say, joke, no man is an island, but local government could be. That they were completely self-contained little units, and their attitude with the other local governments of the same peer group was, well, if those people were really smart and or intelligent or as good looking as us, they'd all be living here with us. So, and there was a lack of cooperation I saw, or just desire for it. But now there's a lot more, at least talk about collaboration and everything. Why is that?
And that's the greatest danger for local governments and local city council members and local residents who get caught in that, my city's okay, it works for me, I don't need to think about it. Because we no longer can do that. There is not the money to sustain that. And you don't get the best services. You don't get the best opportunities for your residents or for your businesses if you are operating within a bubble.
Okay. So now this looks like an ordinary ink pen, but it's not. It's actually a magic wand. So I'm going to wave it over you. Ooh.
Oh, thank you.
And now...
This is when I get thinner and younger?
Yes.
And all my dreams
trust
come
me,
true.
If it worked at all, I'd be doing it to myself all the time. But the question for you is, all right, so you're now, the governor calls you up and asks you to become the local government czarina, so to speak, all right? What would you have the governor and the General Assembly do? And you could make them do it because you've had the magic wand. vast overview, that would lead to better collaboration, shared services, and even that other C word, consolidation. What would you have them do to get us a better government here in Ohio?
I think I wouldn't start with mandates.
Okay.
I would start with education.
Okay.
Because I think that the residents don't understand. I don't think the local government elected
Okay.
officials understand
Okay.
or know how to.
Okay.
They may think that it's good up here, but when it comes down to my community, all they see is things they have to let go of, things they're losing without understanding how to get to a point where they're not only gaining, but they're enriching.
Okay.
And so I think you can't just tell people to do it and tell them it's good. You've got to show them. You've got to explain to them how
Okay.
they can get involved. Because I moved to my community because I liked my community. I don't want a monogamous, a
Right,
homogeneous,
right.
a homogeneous community where we all look alike. I chose mine because it was best for my family.
Okay.
And so I don't want to lose that. I love my neighborhood. I don't want to lose that community feel. And so there needs to be some ways how we can save money, get good services, but retain that local flavor, that local feeling of connections that's so important to all of us.
Well, let me ask this question then. One of the things I'm fond of saying is that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. However, you can salt the feed. Now, the state has tried, and full disclosure, I serve on the Local Government Innovation Council that has money, and the pushback has always been from some powerful folks inside the administration is you want to pay local governments to do the thing they should already be doing, which is innovation, shared services, collaboration, not even consolidation per se, just sharing 911 services and sharing radio equipment and things of that nature. Why is it then that even when we offer them money to do these things, our doors are not exactly being blown off the hinges by people pounding on it saying, give me money, I want to do more of the right thing? Why is that?
Well, if I look at a federal example of the stimulus money, which was like opening the federal coffers and giving money to local government for almost anything, almost. One of the criteria was you had to be shovel ready, which means you had to have your engineering studies done.
Right.
Which wealthy communities have their engineering studies done 5 years in advance. Those that are just getting by do it month to month.
Okay.
If they have any money for engineering at all. So the ones that needed the stimulus money the most couldn't get there. They had no shovel-ready projects.
You raise a point, I've forgotten all about that. 5 years ago, when the whole stimulus thing came through, Ohio had a very hard time competing with other states because we have complete and total balkanized local decision-making, local planning, and because of that, not on a county-wide basis. For example, in Florida, yes, Florida has a almost laissez-faire attitude towards land development, but they have to have a very good, strong transportation thing because at least 4 times a year, everybody has to leave their home en masse and run away from a hurricane. So they have huge amounts of planning. They know what they need. And Ohio, we didn't have shovel ready because we didn't have planning. So in effect, what you're calling for is that we need to have better planning here in Ohio.
Yes. And so when you talk
regional,
about
cooperative,
which is why it's even more important now than it ever has been before. And if we go back to the state level, those that have the employees that can sit down and innovate are the ones that have more money than the poor communities,
Right.
the ones with the empty wallets.
Yeah.
And so when the state wants to impact those, they've got to pay for the expertise to come in there and pay for the desire because they're getting by with what they have.
Well, then
To change the game costs a lot of money.
Yeah, well, let me ask this. It kind of goes to the issue then of civic capacity then. which you've heard me babble on about now for several years. And Upper Arlington has huge amounts of civic capacity, okay? I'm not worried about Upper Arlington, Shaker Heights, Bexley, Oakwood, Indian Hill and Cincinnati, other places like that have a huge amount of civic capacity. But this kind of relates to then is the civic capacity in Monroe County, okay, Hocking County, my home county of Preble County, where the people, used to be that the people who owned the businesses lived in the community. And now it's not homegrown businesses. I mean, Vinton County now no longer even has a grocery store. So how do you create then in those areas? Do you have any insights on how do you help the civic capacity in those areas where the civic capacity is frankly all concentrated in areas now like Upper Arlington and Bexley and Oakwood? How do we increase their civic capacity? Do you have any ideas for that? Should we loan you out then? Is that how we do it?
Yes, we could.
Okay, all right.
And actually, that's one of the things I'm doing now. I didn't get to what I'm doing now, which is I'm a consultant with the Collective Genius, which is gathering capacity to help solve problems for, it could be local governments as well as nonprofits or for-profit. But I think that if the state could give innovation money to build that civic capacity, and you may need to import it to begin with, but with the whole premise of let's empower these people.
Okay.
And if I go back to when I went into the clerk of court's office, I had volunteers from the business community, from the universities, from communications companies, to all come in and lend and volunteer to solve the problems. People want good government, and if they can see they make a difference, they will be there. Okay. So in the small counties where they don't exist, those businesses do have tentacles up the chain. Right. If they knew they could make a difference there. Okay. And were invited in, and the ground was fertile enough that things could get done, I think you could see a difference. You could grow that empowerment. Okay.
Well, now, you've always struck me as being a very optimistic person.
I am.
Okay, but then this is not a fair question. So what keeps you up at night then?
What keeps me up at night? Not much.
Okay, all right.
But what I do think about is the closed-mindedness of local officials and state officials in seeing the need to cooperate, seeing the need to work with everyone that's at the table to solve the problems versus their own personal problems or issues or their party's issues. I think when the term limits came in for the state, we all thought that was a great idea because it would give more people opportunity. Right. And it, in my opinion, is an idea that they didn't see the apples or the fruit that was going to come from there. Yeah. So we've got legislatures who come into it and don't understand this complex machine. The people they hire, the people they can afford to hire, are young people who have
out of college,
high ideals, but not yet ready to see the implications of if you change this, this shifts this over here. Yeah. And so the people with the history, the people that know how things move and interact and how the gears all intertwine become the lobbyists, which by their very nature comes with an issue attached to them. Right. Good or bad, that is their role.
And then it becomes not a fair fight. Yeah. Because the lobbyists will know how things work, and they know what little subtle pressure points to do and everything. And then the question is, is it, there's a theory out there that I reject that says that if you if you are a citizen of Ohio, you should belong to some group or association that will sit there and, be able to sway the General Assembly to move your way. But I go, you know what? For the vast majority of Bobby and Betty Buckeye out there, they don't think about it in those terms. They don't think about contacting their association or something. And it has had, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And I see this a lot too. And I got some ideas on how to fix it, but we'll have to wait and see how they actually flow out.
And I think it trickles down to local government. Local government used to be community-minded people that wanted to volunteer in their city. And they could make a huge difference there. And it was fairly easy to operate within that environment. Today, when you have to interact with the state so much, and it's more complicated.
Yeah.
It's more than they can take on.
Yeah.
Or it becomes the political parties who have to keep shoving new people into the state house. They start putting people in local governments. So those council members who used to be thinking about the long-term future of the city now think about their term and how they can get to the next place.
Yeah, moving up the food chain. So you've always struck me as being a very cultured and literate person. So has there been a couple books out there that have had a huge amount of influence, or you're reading something right now that you'd like to share with people or anything?
First, thank you for telling me I'm cultural and literate. I'd like to.
Yeah.
I enjoy reading,
Well,
so that's good.
If not, you have us completely fooled.
That's going to be good too.
All right.
I've always got books going, but one I just read on vacation I would recommend was The Invention of Wings by Sue Monk Kidd, which is the story of the Grimke sisters, which are real people, which I'm embarrassed to say I've never heard of, which were the first female abolitionists. And
I saw the reviews of this, which is the thing I always say. I never get a chance to read hardly any of these books people talk to me about. But
they wrote the pamphlet that then Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin about. And they were also women's suffragettes before Carrie Nation and all those, and I had never heard of them. So I'm saying it here. Sarah and Nina Grimke were really important historical figures that were introduced to me in this book.
And basically overlooked. I'm listening right now to the biography of Grover Cleveland, which most people kind of go, what? I go, look, before there was Jesus, there was John the Baptist. And what Grover Cleveland really was, he was Teddy Roosevelt's John the Baptist. He paved the way for Teddy to come through. So by listening to this, I'm understanding more now about how Teddy Roosevelt was able to build upon what Grover Cleveland did as a Democrat. And of course, Teddy was a Republican. But the two actually had a very interesting intertwined careers. But I want to look up the Grimke girls.
I think you should. I think they had a lot to say.
I bet they would too.
And then the other one I would recommend to you is Mandela's Way by Richard Stengel, and it's 15 Strategies on Life, Love, and Leadership by Nelson Mandela. And I really enjoyed his comments. And he is inspirational to me in that he came from being a terrorist to being
a communist. He really was a communist.
And became a peacemaker and a leader and involved everyone in the solution. And boy, that's something we all need to emulate a little more fully.
He had a definite fork in his road. It was a very close time for him there in the early 60s. He could have simply gone socialist, communist, and instead he went, no, I'm going to go reconciliation, peace, and understand I'm not always right.
And between Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu, one small country has had two huge leaders that have made a difference in the world.
At least in the question, do the times produce the men or the men and women produce the times? I don't know the answer to that one yet. So, well, this has been Gene Krebs, and I've been sitting here having a delightful conversation with a good old dear friend of mine, Jenny Barney. We've been talking about governance reform, local government, civic capacity, and how to make Ohio a better place. I have no idea who we're going to have next week, So, but tune in, and on behalf of the Center for Community Solutions, we're high on Ohio.
For more about the Center for Community Solutions or their publications, please visit www.communitysolutions.com.